Welcome to the ProcureTech podcast, bringing insight and inspiration into how digital technology is shaping our profession. I'm your host, James Meads, tea drinker, expat, definitely not your typical consultant. Yes, greetings and welcome to another episode of the ProcureTech podcast. And this week we've got a topic that is a little bit of a geek topic for me. No, it's not data. We had that one last week, although that is something that I always talk about too. But no, this week we're talking about productivity and efficiency and how technology can solve a lot of our challenges, particularly in the remote working situation that many of us are now finding ourselves in. And we're going to dig into the topic of to what extent we think technology can solve that and what tools are out there that can aid and facilitate that, particularly around democratizing this and bringing it to a wider audience rather than some of the more traditional tools that have been out there for a number of years that are generally seen as being more enterprise level and more expensive indeed. So my guest today is a procurement category manager turned SaaS entrepreneur who has actually developed his own tool in this field to help solve some of the problems that we're going to talk about today. So Richard Sains from Acada, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be here.
Excellent. So first of all, Richard, I mean, you're an IT procurement professional by background. Tell me a little bit about what ultimately drove you to make the switch from having, I guess, a pretty safe career in procurement to the roller coaster world that is being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I've been in procurement for about 20 years now and worked in generous categories and then sort of fixed on IT procurement as sort of where I wanted to end up. And then went into consultancy. So about 7 years ago, worked as a sort of an interim IT procurement sort of head of or category manager, and working through with all these different clients, I found that there were very similar challenges in all areas, which was recording the work that was being done, being able to sort of track what everyone's working on, you know, all the information that goes with that. So I really felt that it was time to develop something as well. You know, things they weren't so easy to use. So yeah, started Acada last year. And our mission really is to develop software which helps procurement teams focus on more valuable work and make that, everything that we build has to be easy to use, innovative, secure, great value. But most importantly, it's designed by procurement professionals for procurement professionals. So, that's what we've been working on.
And I think you touched on a couple of really good points there. I mean, certainly there are a fantastic new generation of procurement tools which are now coming through, especially in these sort of niche areas. And I do think that, you know, this is democratizing procurement tech to a large extent and making it available to some, not tiny companies, but certainly smaller companies that now have solutions available to them that don't require a team of integration consultants to implement them. And one of the things in these new breed of tools that I'm seeing coming through, and you alluded to it with what you've done with Acada, is that user experience seems to be a core element of this. And if you look at some of the older, more traditional procurement tech solutions that weren't maybe so user-friendly, I'm thinking of one in particular that I've used in the past, I do think that will be a differentiator between the ones that ultimately succeed over the coming years and the ones that will fade into obscurity. So it'll be interesting to have this discussion from yourself as an IT procurement professional, whereas my background is more of an indirect generalist with, you know, specific experience in sort of logistics, MRO, and facilities management, always in sort of manufacturing environments. And my interest in all of this tech really stemmed from being a bit of a productivity nerd and a fighter against all things that I see as being waste or pointless red tape. I think part of that goes back to my historically having always worked in manufacturing companies, that they have lean philosophies all over their production sites and their manufacturing processes. But, you know, you look at their administrative processes and they're a disaster. And so, I mean, you've no doubt been following specifically the procurement tech space much more intensely than I have for a longer period of time. So what do you see as being the biggest changes over, say, the last 5 or so years in terms of software that you're seeing coming out onto the market and succeeding?
As you say, from a user experience point of view, I mean, going back sort of 5-10 years, a lot of IT software was bulky. I'm thinking, things like the old ERP systems, the P2P systems. You had end-to-end processes that had just been sort of lifted and shifted into a tech piece of software, and it was more about making sure there was coverage across the end-to-end rather than actually making sure the user experience was, it was sort of an easy-to-use system. So I think what I've seen, especially started off in IT, was move to an agile framework. So away from, thinking back 10 years ago, if we were tendering an ERP solution, it would be potentially a 5-year process where you start off and you've got, a year for the sort of planning an RFP, then you've got 2 years to build this thing, and then you've got the rollout. And by the time you've implemented that, the business has totally changed.
And the solution's probably obsolete as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the switch I've seen is more towards this modular thing, and that's come into the procurement landscape as well now, so that you're dealing with these providers who are they've got these niche solutions, and that's great because that means that you can really sort of drill down into one area and get a really best of breed solution. I guess the issue that it also brings up is trying to knit together all those different solutions. But yeah, that's somewhere we can help.
And do you think things like API integration are making that easier that weren't there, 5 or maybe certainly 10 years ago, possibly even 5 years ago?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think that's a big change we've seen, especially the enterprise tech now. It's a lot of it is SaaS based. You can very easily get these through APIs, plug everything together. That's really sort of driven. Products like MuleSoft and especially companies like Salesforce have really used that to their advantage, because you're taking the software from doing a particular purpose to becoming more of a platform, and that gives a lot. Obviously it increases the stickability of that particular product, but it's great for users that they're able to do lots of different things in one place. And if you need to swap out any one element, it's a lot easier. It was one of those things that was almost you just couldn't do in the olden days, which was swapping out your ERP, because it was such an integrated part of your business. But now you can do it on a modular basis and swap things out and integrate them in, and that's only beneficial for the end users, I think.
So while you may be very dependent on, let's call it the mothership, a lot of the components that make up the add-ons are pretty seamlessly interchangeable, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So moving on to what we're talking about around waste and inefficiency in procurement teams, what do you see as the most common forms of waste and inefficiency? And the second part to that question would be, to what extent do you then see automation or technology as the solution, or perhaps even maybe it's not the total solution and you just see it as a part of the solution?
Yeah, I think there's, clearly there's a lot of waste. Procurement has been on this journey for, it seems like my whole career, to becoming a more strategic business function. And there's still elements of the process that don't really deliver value. And as you say, you've worked in a lean background. I'm always, coming back to anything you're working on needs to be delivering an outcome. And if it's, clearly things like compliance are important, and making sure that you've got a paper trail for things that are being done. But I think process for the sake of process is where I see a lot of waste. And really, it's the sort of thing that there needs to be a continual improvement, going back over it, look at your process and seeing what areas can be, ideally, deleted if they need to be deleted, or, stop working on certain things. But also, if there are elements that could be automated, or elements that you think actually they no longer fit within the procurement function, maybe more of a sort of a finance or some other department's role, then making sure that those sit in the right places. Leading on from that, automation is clearly very important. I think a lot of teams still base a lot of the work that they do, track it through Excel or other spreadsheets. And actually, for most teams, that's just not scalable. It may work for sort of 6 to 9 months, but you get to a point where you've got so many projects on there, so many users, you get little whatever circular references or corruptions in the data, and then you sort of lose everything. And it's, it's a manual overhead to working like that. People have to actually think about, I need to go on and update this tracker and provide this information. And it's a bit of it's looking back. It takes time and it diverts you away from what you should be doing, which is building relationships, doing your sort of more strategic procurement work, which sometimes falls by the wayside.
No, I completely agree, and it's the running joke, isn't it, that Microsoft Excel and SharePoint are the usual procurement team's tech stack. And even though things are changing, and maybe that was the case 5 years ago, it's probably not now in a lot of organizations, but it's still surprisingly the case in more than we'd like to think, I'm sure. So collaboration tools can support a faster or more efficient way of working. And especially when we consider, that a lot of us are working remotely now and probably will be doing for the foreseeable future in some way, shape or form. So let's talk a little bit about teams working remotely and some of the inefficiencies of existing working practices that will have been laid bare as a result of, businesses having to move to a remote working environment pretty much almost overnight, really. So, from a systems perspective, a lot of those fixes were sort of short-term fixes that could be applied once people had got into the rhythm. But if they're more problematic sort of cultural concepts around, having a more old-fashioned micromanagement or very, as you said, process for the sake of process-driven culture running through a lot of companies. I think this, especially in a remote working situation, and especially if you're very highly dependent on something like SharePoint, which trying to access from a remote VPN connection, I know because I've done it in my previous job, is a nightmare and it slows you down. So, this can all elongate processes and add to waste and busy work if you're doing this in a remote working situation. So, let's talk about larger organizations here, because SMEs can be a bit more nimble in this regard. But if we assume that remote work is going to be here in some form to stay, what do you see as those bigger challenges to larger organizations in adapting to this new normal?
I think, that sort of hits the nail on the head. I think, so what I've seen in larger organizations is that there's I guess more spreadsheets. This last period has made things, like in some ways it's driven things forward, and the fact that people have to be working remotely, and some businesses have done great off the back of this. So companies like Zoom and Slack and Salesforce and those have sort of seen their earnings shoot up over this period. But I think for a number of the large corporates, there's been this sort of race to find out information or track information, and you find that generally what will happen is there'll be a spreadsheet for maybe 10 or 15 different initiatives that people are working on to try and get on top of things. And that's, for the short term, that's sustainable. But I think, longer term, there needs to be a better way of working like that, because, the information's very often outdated almost the moment that it's been put in. You think about how fast things have been moving over the last sort of 4 or 5 months. It's been pretty intense, but getting that real-time information and getting a clear picture, that's the thing that's the real challenge.
I think that's really important in terms of using spreadsheets, is that you don't know how up to date the information is from a specific user that's added it. Whereas if you've got a SaaS tool that timestamps everything, then clearly you do. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So just a quick interlude before we move on with the rest of the podcast, just to say that if you are a procurement leader or a finance leader in a manufacturing company and you're struggling to get to grips with your spend, or you just maybe need an extra pair of hands to resolve a specific issue and drive some bottom line results, just drop me a connection request on LinkedIn, or just ping me an email to info@jamesmeadsconsulting.com, or just follow the link in the show notes to book a free 30-minute initial call with me so as I can learn more about your business and what I can do to help you. So now let's jump right back into the interview. Do you see technology as something that is going to be more of a facilitator or a productivity enabler, or do you actually see it completely replacing and automating some manual tasks, or what I call busy work, in their entirety, and eliminating some operational and tactical procurement roles?
I guess I hope it's the latter. And when we talk about eliminating roles, I don't know whether it would. The ideal would be that it sort of automates the busy work and allows those professionals to work on things that are of more value to their organisation. So, if you're an administrator in procurement, you should. I don't think you should worry that your role's sort of going to go. I've really found it to be more fun. The more you sort of like go up in your career, you work on some great projects and you build some great relationships. And I guess if you work in data analysis or whatever, those sort of roles, that they're still important. And ideally it's all the sort of the boring crunching a spreadsheet type role where you sort of look at lines of data and it's almost a bit like being in the Matrix. That's the sort of thing that a computer can do far more easily through RPA or whatever. But I think the insights that you have and how you apply that data into a business context and use that to make valuable business decisions, that's where the value is. That's what we should be using people for. And yeah, I really hope that we're able to manual processes, sort of that real sort of hardcore data crunching. Hopefully that's the sort of thing that can be automated over the next sort of 5 years or so. And really, over this last period, procurement's really come to the fore. And you've seen organizations, obviously risk management's very important now. Procurement's being seen as a much more important function. And I think all these things together hopefully will create this perfect storm, which will really, really elevate procurement, and it will take that jump that's been trying to take for a little while.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I share your optimism up to a point. I just think the risk is always, as long as we as a function report into a CFO, it's always going to come down to how much money did we save the company. I think my personal opinion is that if we start reporting into supply chain or into operations in some way, shape or form, we will be seen more as a value driving function rather than just a cost cutting function. But yeah, I think the jury is still out in terms of, 2-3 years down the line after all this is settled, will our position be elevated in an organization? I guess nobody knows is the honest answer, but I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. I think would be the best way to describe it.
I think a key piece there as well is actually that I've seen it talked about a lot. I guess we've got to stop talking about it and actually do it. That's it's there for the taking. And I think, it's not, we can't just talk it to happen. It's got to be every different procurement function in every different business has to take that step on their own, because businesses, they're all different. They all have different requirements. They see procurement sitting in different places, or supply, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think we all need to take that step at this point.
And part of what you've developed sort of speaks to that, doesn't it? Because if you can eliminate a lot of busy work and automate tasks that were previously being done manually, or certainly facilitate the automation or the simplification of getting to the point where you've got an answer that you can analyze and make a decision off the back of, that frees up a lot of white space for the procurement professional. And I take your point that, not every procurement admin assistant is going to be capable of moving into a more strategic procurement role, but category managers who typically, I don't know what your experience is, but certainly mine as a category manager, I probably spent 50% of my time doing non-value added tasks.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah, and for what I was being paid, it was a waste of the company's money. You wouldn't hire an accountant to go and work in the staff canteen, for example. So on that point, with what you've developed, you describe it as an innovative system for procurement people to manage their workload and give visibility to their leaders and stakeholders. Can you expand a little bit then on what it does and where you see the key value points in what you've developed?
Yeah, sure. So got a product called Project View, and it helps users to manage the end-to-end procurement process. And that's not just the tender process, which you see in many e-sourcing suites, but it's everything that the team does. So single source negotiations, renewals, even supplier exits. So it makes users more productive. It walks you through the process, so you can upload your process in there with relevant tools and templates that you need. So everything's to hand as you need it, which it helps to reinforce your process, but it also helps to onboard new team members so they can quickly see, what is it you do at certain stages, and provides that sort of reminder for existing members who sometimes, they may take a shortcut here or there. So I think, it's about making sure that process is, as we said, sort of streamlined. It's not not over the top, and maybe there's only certain areas where you're that bothered that you have a particular paper or whatever it is at that point. But it's very, very flexible in that regard. As you say, it gives leaders better visibility on what's being worked on. So we have some innovative dashboards and data visualization, and that can be shared with C-level execs. It's actually something that looks good. There's a lot of systems out there where you get the sort of the output of the data, and you look at it and think, I'm going to have to put this into another system to play around with it to make it look good. But one of the things that we've always tried to do is we've really made sure that we get something that looks good out of the box, and it gives everyone easy access to project documentation. So I don't know about you, but you'll find, if you work on a contract renewal and you want to find out what happened a year ago, it's okay if you've got a very good cloud document structure, and you might have to go digging a little bit, and it might not be in there or whatever. But this, you can quickly search back on the project under the sort of the supplier, and then people will look back and try and see the audit trail, and there won't be anything there really. It gives everyone easy access to the project documentation, so there's no more wondering about what was done on a project. You can quickly look back and see the documentation against a particular supplier or stakeholder or procurement user, and that's great for compliance and making sure that the right steps have been taken. The other thing is it's got a powerful task management module, so that helps users work together to progress multiple projects at the same time. So the activity you need to be working on that day is all listed for you, and you can get going on that. And the idea for me was really to make sure that the data was up to date. You really need it to be something that enables someone to work more efficiently, so that they want to be using it, because quite often procurement systems are things that you have to do, and you have to go back on and enter some data. Whereas if you're obviously using it because it makes your job easier, then there's a far greater likelihood that the data that's on it is going to be up to date.
Yeah, so if I summarize, then it kind of solves three problems. So it removes a lot of the need for email. It avoids having to search through Sharepoint, which is not a user-friendly tool. Certainly in my view, it's not. And it avoids things being stuck on people's C drives when they leave the company and them just disappearing into nirvana. But it also gives some sort of reporting structure in terms of projects and progress and some sort of, I guess, sort of Kanban or daily dashboard of tasks that a specific individual needs to get along with or update or address at any given point in time. So there are a lot of SaaS applications or even existing procurement technologies that are out there that kind of touch on certain points of what you've developed. So are there any specific inefficiencies or value add that you feel that this gives over some of the other procurement tools that are already in existence?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things I've always thought about this, I guess, from the point of view of a procurement leader. So, things like helping with resource management, looking at the pipeline, being able to do more sort of forecasting. So always look at and using some sort of analytics and RPA for that to make sure that you've got a clear view of what's coming up. So it's not just the historic what's happened and what's going on right now, but it's what's coming up. So that's quite a key area for me, and engaging the stakeholders in the process as well. So we run a model where you limited licenses, and you're able to issue those to stakeholders if that's something you want to do, and therefore those stakeholders, rather than sort of spending time updating those stakeholders, you can then just give them access and they can see exactly what's being worked on. And clearly, if they've got access to the documentation, you can sort of collaborate using your organization's cloud storage. So yeah, that's one of the areas where you see it as slightly different to some of the other tools that are out there.
And I think that's on a slightly different tangent, but I think the big advantage in terms of giving stakeholders access, and I'm thinking more now on sort of P2P applications, but if they can see at any given point in time where their requisition or their order is in the whole chain, that eliminates a lot of email and a lot of phone calls and a lot of correspondence between procurement and the operations. And I think similarly with what you've got here, if I would see that as being a sort of core must-have element if I was going to buy this piece of kit that you've got, because it just saves a lot of preparation for project meetings. It saves a lot of updates to management. If your key stakeholders at the click of a button, providing they've been trained and they understand how to use it, can go in and see the status of any projects or any actions at any given point in time, that again, I think creates quite a lean and agile mindset of how to work on project work.
Yeah, totally. And I think it was, even sort of 5 years ago, I found that businesses were a little bit more siloed in their approach to things. But I think there is a more openness in the business context, so that teams are working more collaboratively together. I mean, you still have, obviously, in some organizational cultures that maybe be a bit more siloed. But I think tools like this really help to break down those barriers and to get everyone working. The best procurement process and the fastest procurement process is always one where people work very closely together and they all invest the time. As long as you have that, I think you can run processes a lot quicker than potentially have been in the past, where you're sort of chucking requirements over the wall, and then you take a little while to sort of process that, and then it's going to the supplier, and it's all very siloed, and it takes a lot of time. So yeah, I approach everything with a great deal of optimism, and I see that from a procurement point of view, we can really help to sort of improve that process and drive forward the speed at which we work.
So what's next for you in terms of developing this further? Because I know it's reasonably new when you compare it to some of the other tools out there. So what's your growth strategy or your next steps in terms of moving beyond where you are now?
One of the things that we're working on now is looking at how we can partner with other organizations to provide niche requirements at certain ends of the process. So as I say, we've sort of digitized this end-to-end procurement process, and the idea now is really that it can punch out into sort of best of breed tools along the way. That's the sort of next step that we're taking. But as well as that, also working with clients to do more, I guess, custom developments or potentially working on things like very specific requirements for customers. That's another avenue that we're looking at. So yeah, those are the sort of areas we're working on.
So by best in breed solutions, you mean tools that Acada doesn't currently cover, things like contract management or e-sourcing that are an obvious natural sort of complementary fit to it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I mean, I think as we said, there's this fantastic new generation of procurement tools that are coming along, and some of them in sort of more niche areas. I'm thinking of tools like Deployed. So there's a great piece of statement of work software out there. I don't know if you've spoken to Emma and the team over there doing some great work.
No, I don't know them actually. I'll have to reach out to them now. Thanks for the tip.
You must have spoken to the guys at Visible for supplier collaboration, Mark Pereira's team over there. So there's companies out there doing some great things and really focusing on a particular problem and solving that in a fantastic new way. So yeah, that's where I see people going deeper in certain areas and really fixing these problems. And then as I say, I guess that's an area where the sort of the Acada process can knit all these things together and sort of help people out there.
So final question before I ask you, where can people get hold of you if they want to learn more? If I was a CFO, what would be the business case if you're trying to sell this to me as a budget holder, in terms of, what value can it drive me, both on the productivity side, but also on, its potential benefits to the bottom line?
I mean, some of the research we've done would suggest that in a standard procurement team, probably about 30% of the time is spent on administration, and using the Acada tools, you can free up a large percentage of that to work on more strategic work. So more discussions with suppliers or going a little bit deeper in certain areas. So clearly CFO see the value of procurement, and I guess it's the business case is getting the team that you've got, the investment you've made to deliver more results. And that's our sort of strapline is deliver more. And that's what the Acada tools enables you to do.
So essentially just getting more out of your existing resources by deploying them smarter and freeing them of a lot of the tasks that are below their pay grade.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You're speaking my language there. It's something that I'm very passionate about as well. And I do genuinely think that, the resources are there. They're just being deployed in the wrong way. So I'm totally with you on that one. So final thing before we sign off, Richard, if anyone would like to book a demo or learn a little bit more about this, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
So yeah, you can get hold of me on LinkedIn, Richard Sains on LinkedIn. Acada also has a page on LinkedIn, or rich@acadatech.com is my email address.
And that's ACADA. I'll spell it in the show notes and put the link in there as well. Rich, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think we're both singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of where we both think procurement needs to go with all of this. So wish you all the best in your growth, and keep in touch and good luck.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I don't know about you, but I always feel a warm glow when a procurement practitioner becomes an entrepreneur, and especially in the SaaS procurement tech space, because it just goes to show that there are so many practical solutions to problems that us procurement professionals see that can be then developed and successfully launched into a procurement technology tool that serves other people in the profession. So thank you again for listening. Take care. We will catch you again next week with another episode. And this time we've got Edmund Zagorin from BidOps on the show, who recently won the 2019 award from Digital Procurement World as the best new startup. So definitely an episode you don't want to miss. Until then, look after yourselves, take care, and I will catch you again soon. Bye-bye for now. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the ProcureTech podcast. If you like the show, then please subscribe, or even better, why not write us a quick review on Apple Podcasts? It would not only really make my day, but it would also help our mission to enable procurement and finance leaders to become more data-driven through the power of digital transformation.